just going to continue to work on the file explorer. There were some issues that I didn't expect, so it's taking more time to finish everything. It's also because it's kind of annoying to work on this. But hopefully I'm gonna be done soon with this thing. I'm trying to follow the list here, and now I'm on this tab. And these other two, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to try to implement or not. I think probably, so like for the copy and paste, I was looking at so based on the way that the VS Code works, it just works it works if you copy and paste inside of the application. But if you copy inside and then you paste on the operating system file explorer, it doesn't work. So I was looking into the documentation, trying to see SOC. There's nothing to paste here. And on Godot, they already had an option which I left and I didn't have to change. Just basically to copy the path. So they do have a function on the display server that allows you to put stuff on the clipboard, which is just an API like everything else. So the operation system provides an API, which is a function that allows you to interact with the hardware. And for the clipboard, I think it's probably some parts of data structure from the operation system that's gonna keep track of whatever data is on the clipboard. So, but to make that work across applications, I think is harder. So that's the part that I think I'm not going to implement because I think it's not worth spending the time. But I was trying to think about like if you are going to copy from one application and then paste on the operating system file system, you're going to have to understand how the file system, how the file system from the operating system works, so that you can create the other part of the bridge. Because from what I can tell, I think that it's not going to be that hard to implement on the application because it is kind of like the same thing as the copy of the path. You just get the path of the file, and then when it's time to paste, like you get the path, you keep track on the states of the class, and then when it's time to paste, you just get the path that you stored on the copy, and then if it's a file, you read the file, and then you just put on the other path, update the state of the classes and the cache. And if it is a folder, then you just do the same thing, but recursively. So I think for the application, I'm probably gonna try to implement, but I kind of don't want to do it. Like it's kind of annoying. So just gonna try to get it out of the way. But now so after doing this, I have to. This is the other part that I wasn't sure if I'm gonna change or not, because this one is gonna be more annoying. So there's a trade-off that I'm not sure about, which is like there's two different ways to do things from the model perspective. So like based on the way that I'm doing things now, I'm using a struct to update the view with batches, and then it's kind of annoying. I had to figure out a way to I had to use a bunch of mutex, and I can probably change this to simplify, but I think like for now it's probably not worth it. I'm just gonna leave it like this. But every time that you have there was a post on Stack Overflow, I think, that's the amount of mutexes you need depends on the amounts of threads you have, and the amount of resources you need to that are going to be shared across the threads. So the guy recommends you like do one line of threads, one line of resources, and then you create arrows for which threads are going to use which resources, and then based on that you figure out how many mutexes you want. But I just went based on intuition, so like that's why I think that like, it can be simplified, but I don't care that much. But I'm basically updating the file system presenter through the model in batches, so that it's not very slow. And I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, because of this, I'm using these nodes. So the way that they do it, the way that they did it before was with a class. So they had this, which I didn't delete. I was thinking about whether or not was is worth it to delete this, and I also had to change the tree and tree item classes a couple of times because it wasn't working with the stuff that I had. So I had to spend a bunch of time thinking about this as well. But basically, on the previous version of this, which is the editor file system, which is where I got this class from, this class is basically just changing the editor file system to try to improve it a little bit to make it work with the stuff that I'm trying to do. But the way that they had it before is that they were traversing the whole directory based on the roots, and for each folder they created this class here, and then they stored the state of the folder, which is a subfolder from the roots, on this class, and store the files as well. So that's one way of doing this, but the problem is that if you do it this way, then you're kind of locked into the first state. You have to load the full directory. But this is the part that I'm talking about. That's like there are trade-offs, because I think that this way is going to be slower because you have to use memnew each time that you create one instance of this class when you're loading the directory for the first time. Which now, it was a scan new directory before, but I created another function, which is just load directory, or load data, which is basically the same functionality, but I'm doing breadth first search now. Because this is another thing, breadth first search allows you to load the levels first, which is the surface that they're going to see first. And if you do recursion, then you're going depth first. So the way that they are doing, you're gonna go both breadth and depth because you're looping and you're doing recursion. But it's gonna go depth first. So if you have very large directories, it's not gonna load what the user is supposed to see first. And if you do breadth first search, it loads the surface first, which is the thing that the user interacts with first. So that's why I decided to do breadth first search on this one, and decided to create another function. And the way that I'm doing is just updating progressively using a queue. So I'm sending the information in batches, and this is running on a thread. So that's why you need to use the mutexes on the file system presenter. Because there are other functions that are going to be running at the same time that this one is running. So I need to prevent them from trying to access the same resource. And then this is the part that is kind of annoying because I'm using this struct here, and the reason why I'm using the struct is because, like I said, I wanted to avoid using memnew, because when you use memnew, you allocate memory on the heap, which I think that makes the code slower. But I'm not 100% sure about this, but that's just how I think about it, because just common sense, I think. But it can be, maybe it's not accurate because there's a lot of black boxes involved, like on C++, on the hardware, and everything else. So maybe it's not that slower, but I'm just assuming it is. So that's the reason why I wanted to use this struct here, so that the function runs fast, updates whatever the user interacts with fast. And then as this function is running, I have another function that the purpose is just to load 2 levels of files and folders and subfolders every time that the user uncollapses a path that is not stored, that is not sent to the view. Because the tree on the view works kind of like a cache as well, because it holds the state for the whole thing. So you don't technically need to have the same data on the model, because the view already has the tree state. So like after the first time that you load something, every time that the user interacts, the data is already on the tree. So it's already on the front end. So the decision is more about, like, on large directories, how do you achieve like the middle ground between how fast it's going to load initially and user interaction. So I think that's the main difference. You have one function that loads everything in the beginning, which is this load data, and then you have another function, which is the part that is very annoying, and I had to compromise, I think, because the nuance is like how many directories and files you load, because obviously you want the loading to be fast. So and I had to create a loading icon animation. And the way that I was thinking about before is like, I'm gonna put a limit. So when you uncollapse the path, let's say like the limit is 1,000 items. So if the current level has more than 1,000 items, you just send a signal to the presenter and then you load those items. That's because there's only so many items that are going to be visible on the view. So you send the 1,000 first, so it's very fast, and then you continue to load on the background. And as you continue to load, you put the loading icon somewhere. But the issue with that is that there's a lot of like it was very hard because of the mutexes. Like if you use the thread safe macro here that I'm using on the load data, it just locks the threads based on this one. So the other thread is capped by how long this one takes, which is not very good. And then I had to put like signals up everywhere, and so I just basically compromised and I said like whatever, I'm just gonna load 2 levels deep, because I think 2 levels is how much you need to have. Because if you don't load the second level, then the first level, the folders are not going to show the files. So when they don't show the files, it doesn't show the icons. So I decided to just load 2 levels. That's why I put here. And then I create another signal so that when the folder uncollapses on the view, it changes that's the part that one of the parts that I had to change in the tree item class and the tree class is that instead of showing the folder icon, it shows a loading icon animation. And it was hard to do this because for optimization reasons, I think that the tree only draws once after. But for the loading icon to work, you have to draw a bunch of times, and then there was some problems that you can't call drawing functions from another class outside of that class cycle because of the notification draw, the way that it works. So it's very annoying, but yeah, that's how I chose to do this now. But the issue with this is that, so like when you uncollapse, it sets a loading icon animation until you have the 2 levels here, and then once I emit the signal here, it changes the loading icon from the folder that was uncollapsed. But it's very hard to find. I didn't test one example where it was a very large directory where the icon shows up, and I think it's just going to be very unusual for that to happen. So it seems that the way that it's working now is good enough to, like, it works in basically the same way that VS Code does it, but VS Code is kind of different. It's very different, but it's basically the same kind of logic behind it, I think. But the issue with this one comes on the changes, because since I'm doing this, the way that I'm keeping track of which directories were visited is just based on the path, because it's easier. So I create this function here, and also to synchronize, I had to create these other functions to keep a hash map. And I was using a hash set, but I had to change to a hash map so that I have the data because of the changes. So basically, this is just and it's very simple. It's just a hash map that has all the paths that were traversed, and it maps them to this node metadata, which has the data for the file or the folder. But so there's one of the things that is kind of confusing is this thing here that I had to simplify because of the synchronization on the front end with the model. I had to get all the data that is needed for the node metadata just based on the file path. And this I don't like it very much, because then I rely on these functions here that I have. This one is supposed to return the file from a path. So let's say you have, for example, I have a path file.tax. The get file is supposed to get the file.tax. If it is a file, and this is for files only. And the get base there is supposed to get the sum/path. But it is kind of annoying because I had to change a bunch of stuff on the view as well, because a lot of functionality was relying on the last character to be like this, and I don't like this very much, because obviously you can have there's higher chances you're gonna have edge cases, and then you're gonna have to it's gonna break something. So ideally, I wanted to keep it like this, which is the first function that I did. But this was very annoying to synchronize on the front end because of where you emit the signal. and like the paths you have the moment you meet the signal for renaming files, for example. And I had to change the way that they were doing things as well, which was kind of hard to find a good way to change everything. But basically, because I'm using the node metadata to update everything, and I'm using this cache here to keep track of the paths, then the way that I was thinking about, the way that they were doing before to synchronize or to check for changes is by using a file access, I think, or something like that on the model, which was the previous class that they were using to keep the state. So the difference is that this one is more of a tree. So this one is actually a tree, and this would be the root of the tree. So like this function would run, I think every frame on the notification process, and it's basically checking if there was an external change to the file system. And I think that the way that this works is that it's based on the functionality of this class here. It's basically this function. So this, I think, would be the root folder. And I think that every time there is a change to that path, on the children or on the path itself, is going to change the modify time here. And this is, they also set this on the beginning when you're loading the entire directory. So based on this, they are checking whether or not they're gonna rescan the whole thing. But this is another thing that's, because if you think about it, if you have very large, this is the part that I'm not so sure what should do, because if you have very large directories, then it is not very good, I think, because then you have to traverse everything, and it's going to take a massive amount of time. And then let's say that there were more changes while you were traversing. It gets very complicated. But the benefit of using the PDIR here, the tree data structure, is that it makes it easier, I think, to traverse. So the way that I was thinking about doing this is just simplifying, and I just loop over the cache of paths. So I do the same check that they're doing here for the root path, which I have a separate string that keeps track of the root path. So I do the same check that they're doing, and instead of doing all of this, I just I just loop over the cache of paths, and then I check for each one whether or not it is a directory or a file, and then depending which and whether or not it was changed. So obviously, if it wasn't changed, I can check based on the same function, I think, instead of using this variable. And whether or not it was changed, if it was changed, then I just, depending which, if it is a file or a folder, I just call the other functions that I created to update the paths on the cache. But this is, I'm not 100% sure if it's, maybe I'll put them on a vector. I can call the functions, put them on a vector, because it's like if you're looping over the cache and then you're going to change the paths, it's kind of, I think it might be better to just loop over the cache, put everything that was changed on 2 different vectors, one for the files, one for the directories. But this is the part that I think that's, because that's the thing that is kind of annoying, I think, because if you have a folder and like the folder was changed, but everything else, yeah, but the problem is you kind of need to change everything. Because the moment you change a name, all the paths of the files should change as well, should reflect the name. Yeah, so I think maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you just loop over and then you call the functions to change everything on the cache. Because the functions that I have there are based on the, like, they traverse, if it is a folder, they're going to traverse the entire folder. Yeah, but actually the files is going to be annoying. So maybe I should check again. I should loop over, get the folder first, then update the folders, and then I check for the file changes. And maybe instead of a vector, I keep the files on the hash sets, and then I check as I'm updating the folders. I check just if the hash set has the file, and then if it has, I remove. Then after that, because then I can loop only twice. 3 times. One would be to get everything, and the other one, maybe I shouldn't put the folders on the vector though. Yeah, I think I can loop 2 times. Oh, but yeah, actually, yeah. So I put the files regardless. So if it is a file, just push to a vector. If it is a folder, traverse the vector. Yeah, but then I have to remove. Yeah, that's not very good. I think I have to loop 3 times. But it's gonna be very annoying. And I think I don't need to have this action functionality, because if I can just change the files the moment I run this thing here. And I wasn't sure if I need this, because like the main thing is that you don't really need a cache for many things. I think the main reason why you need a cache is for external changes from the application. I think that's why I thought about it again and decided that I probably might need to do this. I probably need to do this because if you delete a file that's part of the project outside from the file explorer, and then it's not going to show on the application. So I need to change, I think. So probably the best way to do it is to do what else. I think I'm going to create another function before I delete the other one. But my concern is that by having the cache in the way that using the hash map, which is the way that I'm doing now, is not going to be very effective because it's not a tree data structure. So on the tree data structure is easier because you just traverse the tree, and then like I'm pretty sure that there probably is an algorithm that you can get, like as soon as you hit the folder that was changed, you don't need to traverse anything else. You just change that folder, and then you like keep searching on the other branches, because obviously once a folder is changed, you're gonna have to change everything. And I think I'm traversing based on the path of the folder anyway. So I think that this is probably the trade-off. So it might be. So I think that probably the tree is faster, but it takes more memory because it's using the heap. But I think it's slower on the first initial thing, and then it's gonna be faster when you already have the tree. So the tree is faster to update for changes, but is lower on the beginning initialization, and the structs are faster on the initial initialization, and is lower when you update. So I was thinking about maybe I should go back and like, because it might not be that difficult to change the one that I have there, to just use the tree instead, to use the tree as the cache instead, and then I change the functions there so that I traverse the tree instead of traversing instead of using the path to traverse using the axis. And I think that I need that because once there is a change, I have to update the cache, and then based on I have to think about a way to send the signal. Either send the signal or change the state of the. Like maybe I can, because the annoying thing about the signals is, like I said before many times, is that you're kind of capped by the variant class on Godot, which I think that they handle most cases of stuff, but it's just kind of it's not that it doesn't support, but it's kind of annoying to do it. Like if you're gonna send a signal that with a vector of strings, I'm not really sure if you can do that, or if you have to use vector of variants. Vector of variants, I'm pretty sure that you can do it. So I think that's the way that they manage to handle all cases. And there's other data structures as well where you use a variant, and it allows you to pass the information. But it's more annoying to deal with, I think. So I think usually in these situations, probably it might be better to just change the state of the class. So create two member variables on the model and just send a signal and call the function directly from the presenter in the model. So when I scan, I keep track of everything that was changed, and then maybe yeah. So I probably should put the variables on a class. So like dir changed, dir's changed, and files changed. There's the vector of strings with the paths, or a vector of node metadata. But I should probably think about this later. So I'm gonna focus on this other stuff first. So what I'm trying to solve now is that I'm connecting the classes. This is another thing. I think like and I think I don't remember when, but it was some streams ago, I think, that I realized that like so after studying Haskell, it was a lot more clear on my mind how these things work. But basically, the problem here, like from the fundamental principles, the problem is in the way that I'm doing things here. I'm building a scene from code, from C++ code, on Godot directly, because I think it's better. I don't really like using GDScript, and I think it's just easier to scale things, scale resources when you do everything on C++. The downside is on the build, but then I think I can get around if it gets too annoying. But yeah, because you can just put macros to. I was thinking about like simplifying everything to put only include the classes that the project uses, and then you can do this based on macros, or you can create a function that does that. So like checks, guess the root of the scene, which is on here, some of these functions. I'm basically creating a node, which is the root node, which is basically what a scene tree is. And then you use that root node to save the scene file. So you cache the state of the tree using Godot's function, which is package scene and the resource saver. So the package scene allows you to put the state of the entire scene, which is just a tree. So you use the root node, you use the package scene to get the state of the tree, and then use save on the resource saver to save the state on the file. So you basically caching the state on the disk. And obviously, like for the build time, I think, but the problem would be that you would have to be on Python on the AskConstruct files, I think. So like I would think, I might think, probably gonna think at some point something like that. So like you just traverse the tree for all the scenes on the project, and then you just get the types of the classes, and then you just include on the build those types, or like figure out something along those lines. So it's not an issue. I think it's not that big of an issue that every time that I create a class increases the size of the thing, because the actual final build of the application is just going to be a different thing. But the main issue here is that because I'm creating the scene from one runtime environment, and then the actual application is going to run on another runtime environment, which is either the editor or the application itself. There's this gap, which is a bridge that is connected through the disk, which is the cache. So you have the information on runtime, and this is basically the difference between compile time and runtime. So, which is basically the inputs. So there's some stuff you can only figure out based on, because the inputs are what introduce undeterministic behavior on the program, and everything else can be implied by the types that the program has. So because of this gap, like you're translating one runtime environment to another through the disk, the information flow is limited by the serialization process. And this is directly correlated with the relationship between composition and object-oriented. So I think that's object-oriented is easier to cache, but I'm not 100% sure if this is like overall principle. I think it might be, but for Godot, for sure, that's the case because of the way that they design things. But I just think like, just based on common sense, is also, I also think that that's probably the case most of the time. It's easier to cache objects because the types are on compile time. So the objects are the same thing. Like the objects might not be, no, the objects are runtime, but the types are compile time. So because the types are compile time, they are more static. So it's easier to cache them. It's easier to serialize. And that's the reason why I think that object-oriented programming is what games gravitate towards, I think, because of this caching thing. So because of that, the composition side is the connection between the objects on the scene and the connection between the types. And this is like the bridge between them, which happens through functions. So you can view functions as a bridge between different islands. The islands are the nodes on the scene, which are the types, and the bridges are done through the function. So the function creates the paths between them. And these bridges are the things that you have information loss between the runtime environments, because you can't cache them. At least on the current Godot system, you can't cache the bridges, which is whatever happens outside of the object initialization. So this kind of forces you, it's kind of like a gravitational force that incentivizes you to put every thing on the logic encapsulated over the class, which naturally changes the behavior of the class. So I think that this is the reason why it's like a fundamental problem that forces you to create code that is not very optimal, because it's forcing you to go against the nature of the universe, because the universe is going to have a balance between, like, the balance is different because the frequency is going to be different. So because you're forced to put the state on the class, it's going to have side effects on this. Side effects is kind of a bad word, but it's going to have other effects that are going to make you have to put logic that doesn't make a lot of sense on the class. And I think this is one example on the model. I think that's the perfect example, actually. That's the reason why a lot of the times I have to put the variables as a member variables of the class is because it's not very easy to send them through signals. And I think that the encapsulation of the variant can be seen as the retention on the information flow between classes on the disk, because it's the class that encapsulates the path between the different types. I think that's like you're kept by the variant capability, I think. And I don't want to change the variants, but like I said, I do think that based on the way that they did it, it's probably fine. But it's just more of an annoyance, I think. It's just like a slight thing. But for that reason, I think it might be better to create the variables on this class here, and then change the state of the class, and then I send a signal without passing anything to the file system presenter. Then the file system presenter listens to the signal and then calls the model function. So it's kind of like I'm looping over, because the file system presenter is the bridge between the model and the view. So I'm calling the function on the model, then setting the state of the model, then sending a signal to presenter. Presenter calls another function. So the file system is like the bridge between the different functions on the model. The model is not directly connected with the view, and that's what I'm talking about. It limits the information flow between them because of the signals. So the problem that I have now, I'm trying to figure out, which is another thing related to this fundamental problem, is that if you want to connect the signals outside and serialize them, you have to use this flag. Which is this one. So this is how you normally connect the signals, and also you have to use this different callable here because of this relationship between runtime and compile time. Like runtime, you're gonna have the object, because the object is the memory that exists on runtime that is encapsulated by the set, which is the type. So a type is a constriction on space that defines a behavior on that space, and an object is a place on that space. So the place on the space you only know on runtime, because it is undeterministic, because it depends on the inputs. But the place on the type you know before, because it's a predefined set of possibilities that define a restriction on space. So because of that, you have to use this different callable, which is a different initialization that allows you to pass the pointer of the object on compile time and still cache the information on the string file. And then you pass the name of the function, so the pointer for the object and the name of the function, and then you pass the signal you're connecting, and then you have to pass this flag to indicate to Godot that you want the signal to be serialized on the string file. But the reason why this made me remember why it is a problem, because before I didn't want to do the scroll container inside of this class here, because the issue with this is that it's exactly this problem. So now this class here loads components based on the icons, and now I'm doing based on the thing. So depending on which is the name of the icon, it loads a different icon to represent. It's kind of like the same functionality here, where I have a bunch of icons, and then depending on which one you click, it shows the different components. So it's kind of the same thing. But the issue with this, it goes back to the fundamental thing that I was talking about, is that in order to communicate with the classes that are going to be the endpoint of this one, I have to communicate through signals, and this is the problem. So this is one of the reasons I think was probably the main reason why I was thinking about creating the strong container that wraps the classes on this one outside of this class, because in order to make a signal connect with classes outside of this one to the components that this class is gonna hold, you need to have access to that class on the moment you build the class. And this is the problem. So if you encapsulate the classes, the logic for loading the classes on this icon sidebar class, and you make it the way that I'm doing here, which I think is based on the names and based on the, and I don't remember if I'm still looping over, I think, the directory. Yeah, maybe, so I didn't change this, but I was thinking about changing this as well, I think. So I'm looping over this folder, which is a folder inside of the project that is going to have icons with the names of the types that the icon sidebar is going to hold. So example would be file system presenter, which is the first one that I have there, which is the tree icon. So every time you click a tree icon, it's going to be a button in this class, and then the button is going to load the class based on the name that you put inside of the folder. So the name you put has to be the same name of the class, because that's how I'm loading the classes with class DB using these functions here that they provide to create the object based on the name. But the issue of doing this is that now the classes are hidden inside of this one. And this is the problem, because I need to connect the signal from the navbar, which is the class on the top, with one of the classes here. And then because the signal has to be connected through this class, it forces me to put the logic on this class, which forces me to not have the class is going to lose flexibility, because it's going to have to have logic that's going to deal with specific classes. And this is kind of the problem. So this is the reason why I think I was trying to do it from outside. Because obviously, if you initialize the classes outside, I would initialize them at the moment that I'm creating the scene. So I would initialize them here, which I think I was doing here before. And then I'll connect these classes through the icon tab from outside. And then because I would connect them from outside, I could connect the signal directly from the navbar to the class. And I think that's, so it's two things fundamentally. I think one is side effects, another I forgot. I was just talking about now. Yeah, mutability. So side effects and mutability. So changing the values of variables and changing things externally to the function. Those are the main fundamental things that make it hard, because I think those things are hard to cache on the serialization, are hard to serialize on the sync file. So and I think that they are required in some cases because of the nature of space and time. So space and time is not going to be only objects. You're going to have to have the connection between them, which is the shared meaning. And that connection is basically the side effects of mutability. So that's going to be represented with signals on Godot. But then it creates a massive problem, I think, because it generates a gravitational force to do things in a suboptimal way because the system doesn't support the codes. So obviously, based on that, you can either change the system or work around. And I think probably for now it's probably better to work around, I think. But then it generates this issue that I have to think about now, like which is what is the best way to structure the classes knowing about this. And I'm not 100% sure. So I think that's where I'm spending the most amount of time. Is like figuring out how can I design the trade-offs so that it doesn't fuck me up later. But I think for this class, it's probably going to be just easier to make the class have fixed amount of items, and then I could just make it based on if-else statements or switch statements. And I add the functionality on this class based on the buttons. So as I add classes that this one's going to support, I just put more stuff that is going to be based on whether or not the class is one of the buttons. And then if it is, I just do some stuff. So I think this is the function that I'm doing there. But I think probably obviously it can be optimized. Maybe I should use a hash instead of using this. And then just keep the name of the class. I think probably hash is going to be better because then it's O1 to look up. So I don't have to loop every time, which is ON, I think. So I just look up and then call the function. So maybe I'm gonna write this down as well. Problem is that so much stuff to think about. And I think it might be, but I think hash map is probably gonna be fine because I wasn't caching that anyway. So the main part that I'm trying to figure out now is the signal. So after this function runs, this function is the one that is going to be connected to the navbar, which is the other class that has a state of, which is basically like the same pattern as this tabs here. So I'm doing the new folder now, which is open folder. And this happens on this class, which is the ID navbar, which is basically a copy from some other class that I think that I got from the editor node, the same one that they use to keep the options there, and they just change it after to be able to use on what I'm doing now. And then the way that it works is through signals. So you put the logic. The logic determines the view, what's going to happen to the view, and then the file dialog classes and the other classes are just going to emit signals whenever you press OK, and then you connect whatever functionality you want outside of these classes. So it allows you to put whatever label you want, and then the functionality is not coupled with the way that you view the options. But basically, I'm connecting a signal from this class to the other one, which I think is that they're selected. Then this one emits this one, and then I'm connecting from now the icon sidebar to this signal here, which receives the folder that was selected. And then based on the folder, it's going to update the file system. So it's basically changing the directories that the file system is going to show. And the problem that I have here is, as far as I can think, as far as I know right now, based on the last thing that I was seeing, is that is on the configuration. So the way that I'm loading there is based on the previous configuration that I had. And I just now created some other functions so I use this one to update the state on all three classes of the new root folder. And then I call this other function, which is just created now, which is init config, which is just a function that I had on some other spots, but I created so because I'm gonna use this function on two different places now. So So this one loads the configuration, and that's the problem, because when it loads the configuration here, this function is supposed to update clean the cache and the state on both the model and the view, and initialize a new scan with the new root path, which was set before by this function here. So first I set the new root path on the model, then I call this function, which this is another function that I just created on the model, but it's basically just gonna do the initial state. So I clean the cache and I initialize a new scan. And the new scan is supposed to have the new path, but it doesn't have the new path because of the load configuration. And on the load configuration, I'm setting the current path on the model, I think. And then it's making it assume that the older path is the one that is being used. I'm not 100% sure if that's the issue, but I think it is. I think that, yeah, this function here, and maybe I should just realize now that I should probably delete this one. Not sure why I kept it there. From there. No, that one is from the. There's two different paths on the view. One is the current path, and the other one is the root path. I think the current path, it was used to display whatever is selected right now, and I just decided to leave it there because I think it might be associated with some other functions. I'm not 100% sure, and I just thought that it's not worth it to delete for now. But this one is setting the roots again with the old one based on the configuration file. So it doesn't matter that I just set a new roots on the model before I call this function, because this one is going to set to the old one again. So it's not loading the new directory because of this, I think. So what I'm going to think about is how should I change this? Yeah, I think I was thinking about creating a new. So there's two different keys I think you can use. One is the section, and the other one is the values of the section. So I was thinking about moving the path to be the section instead. So I can have a both, and maybe I can. I'm not really sure if I can have. So maybe the question is how to get to this section. Like the actual value here, and not the. I think here just put whatever. I'm gonna look for the file. That's config file, and the logic that I have there just saves on the standard path that Godot uses to save the configuration, which I think is the same path that most applications use, which is the app data path. And then Godot separates them based on the projects, I think. So the one that I'm using now is this one. So when you use the user special name there on Godot, which is the one that I'm using here, this one is just going to replace based on the functionality that it has there on the D axis and the file axis, I think. It's going to replace this with the whatever, depending on the OS, obviously, you're using, it's going to get the standard path for that OS to save configurations and stuff like that. So I'm basically saving this file. And the fsconfig is just a class that has functionality to make it easier to save key pairs. But it saves on you can save on sections as well, which is the. So I think you can use two different keys. The first key is going to be the section, which is the one that I have hard coded there, and the other ones are going to be the key value pairs for that section. So I think this is the one. I'm probably gonna. I think I'm gonna change now. I'm not really sure if it's worth it, because it's the same logic that workspaces have on VS Code, I think. But I'm not really sure if I should do something like put the section as the path, and then also have the root path. And then I check based on the root. Because then I wouldn't need. I think that's pretty much the only function I have to change, so I can move to the other stuff. And maybe instead of using this logic here, and the problem is if it doesn't have anything, I guess I can just put the section as an empty string first. Or maybe I just leave it in the same way that it is. And then when I save, hmm, I can make this equal to an empty string in the beginning, and then I check to see if it's an empty string. If it isn't, I just return the same thing I was returning here. And if it isn't, then I just get that instead. And then I don't need the root path as a key. Just make it based on the section, because every time that I'm gonna save this, I can just change the value. I don't remember if I did this on the beginning. I think just based on the save. Is this I transfer from the view to this class? I mean, maybe that's probably the best thing to do. So I'm gonna think about a name for the beginning. Maybe I put no config in the beginning. Yeah, I'll be right back, but that's probably what I'm gonna do next. Then after I figure this out, if it works, I'm going to think about the copy and paste. And then I'm gonna try to get it over these changes here, which I think is gonna be very annoying to implement. So, but I think that those are the last things that I have to do. Then probably see this stuff on the icon sidebar, and then after that, I think that I can move on to the. I think after that I solved everything on the file system for now. Yes, I think for the vast majority of cases it's gonna be enough, and on the case there's not enough, it's gonna have the loading icon, so it's not gonna be that big of a deal because it's gonna update the files and folders 100 files at a time. Files or folders at a time. So I think it's not that big of a deal. So I'm probably gonna move on to the. I'm gonna have to think about which one is easier to do first. But I think probably the file, because they have a node, I think already on Godot. 100% they have a node because the editor has the file. So it's basically the editor already has everything. That's the good part. So it's like it's just a matter of getting the class that already exists on the editor and then changing them enough so that I can use for my case there. So I'm gonna think about which one is better to start with. The file stuff that is gonna show. So I'm obviously gonna create two different classes. Oh, the other thing I have to do. This one I'm gonna have to think about whether or not it's better to do this one, which is file system doc or something like that. This one I remember I found a plugin that uses GDScript that has the similar functionality to what I was thinking about, but I don't want to use the GDScript. I want to use on C++ because I think it's better, like I said. And this one, I think it probably is another one of those things that is just annoying. It's like not something uh, that I want to focus on. I don't like very much, but it's more like a roadblock to the stuff that I actually want to do that is interesting. So the other classes are obviously more interesting, the file stuff and the terminal doc. But I think that this is something that I'm gonna have to probably do at some point because it's basically I'm thinking about like in the same way that you can change what side the component shows here. I want to be able to have flexibility to change all the components everywhere you want. I might explain the drag and drop functionality that was confusing for me, but now I think is a lot easier to think about. But it's if I'm gonna implement that on the doc manager, it's gonna be hard to think about. But yeah, maybe I'll explain that after as well. So I'll be right back. Probably gonna have to delete the file there, I think. In the beginning. Actually, maybe I don't need this section actually. Just use the root path. And just delete this. Question is whether or not this is needed to put a key here. I think probably because it's just easier because of the model. I'm gonna leave it like this and it's whatever. It's not that big of a deal. This is probably something that I'm gonna have to think about again, like way later. So I don't think it's worth it, true. And it is not something that matters that much. It's something that's gonna be more complicated once I have a lot of other stuff, because then I'm gonna have to. But then for the other stuff, what I'm gonna do is probably create another config file and then put the other like the general settings, configurations, and stuff like that. So I think as it grows, you have more files and you have more cache. One of the problems with this one is that you should probably use JSON as well, because this one there's more space for hacking because of sanitization, I think. So JSON is a better parser, but I don't think it matters that much now. So maybe we just leave everything like this and then just use root path. Maybe but that's not sure. Maybe it's better to use the model instead. I think it's probably better to use this one because like this is something that is kind of annoying either way, because like I can't think about uh, another way to do this. But like all three classes need to have a root path because of their functionality. It might be just a consequence of the same thing that I was talking about before, about the information flow between the different objects. Like because of the way that everything is designed, it forces you to put the logic on the classes, and because of that, you need to have situations like this where you have a variable that is going to be used across all the classes that are connected. You have logic inside of the classes that depend on the variable, and then it forces you to put them to encapsulate everything on a function. I think this function is basically encapsulating a side effect, I think, probably. So it's like synchronizing. But the issue with this is that increase the probability that you're gonna have a mistake at some point. Because you can see a situation where you forget to set or to call this function and set all the paths on all the classes. And just set on the model, for example, then it's gonna desynchronize them. And then it might fuck up other places, and then it's gonna be very hard to figure out because I think that is more likely to be an error on runtime, and then you're gonna have to spend a bunch of time trying to see where the error is coming from. Because I think like the fundamental principle there that I was talking about generates this side order, like higher order effects or consequences. I'm not 100% sure in this case if it is like this. So I was thinking about whether or not to use the model root here to save instead of the one in this class, but it might be better to leave the one in this class, because then if there is an error at some point, like it's gonna tell me that I should be using this function instead of setting the path directly on the model. But I think it's not that big of a deal, so I'm gonna probably try to leave it like this and see what happens. I've been I've been compiling the sometimes VS Code does this because of the difference, I think. Just gonna override because I changed on the other one, so this is another thing that I'm gonna have to see. But this is gonna be on the other class, I think. But maybe it has to be on both. Yeah, I think for classes that are for yeah, it's probably for all the files. And the browser probably works like this as well, from what I've seen. Each tab has its own process, or I think I'm not really sure. I think it depends on the browser, but some browsers probably use threads and some use process sub processes or child processes for each thread. And then every thread that is open, you have to keep track of changes, I think. So probably on the IDE is the same thing. But I'm not really sure if one thread for maybe I'm gonna have to create a worker class, worker thread pool. Godot already has one, but I think it would probably be better to create another one just to like kind of like separate the stuff that I'm doing with the stuff that came from Godot. It's just easier to think about. So this is why I think. But I might have to do. I was thinking about whether or not to do this for the stuff that I already have because of the mutexes there. Maybe it's better to use a thread pool. So like basically you need a way to synchronize or to watch for changes, I think. I want to think about this later. So recently I haven't been compiling on the command because it already does here based on the tasks.json file. So it's just easier, but sometimes it's better to, because of this, it's better to compile on the other one first. Or you changed back to the other one. I think it was because of the VS Code warning there. Either delete the file. Oh, it's because of the different configuration. Yeah, because now it doesn't have anything. Hmm. It's because I'm looking, so I should delete this one. Because when I load the configuration, I'm looking for the new one, which is the root path. It doesn't have anything, and yeah. But I think it's just gonna rewrite the information once it saves. But this one, I'm pretty sure that it was working. I haven't tested in a long time. Hmm. So I assume it's probably an issue with the configuration. There's both an issue with the configuration and the split box, I think. See here. Yeah, it doesn't have anything. Oh, I think it's because of the. I don't remember. I did some changes because I had to on some situations on the function that creates the button, but I don't remember if I changed anything. So it's good that I seeing this now. Actually, it's easier to see from here, I think. As this one. So this one is the one that creates the button there, if there is no configuration. I think I just realized this. But why would it be showing? No, the tree is showing probably. Because one of the questions that I had is like when I was doing the tree with another, the tree is inside of this split box, and the reason why is because of the last configuration that they had. So I remove a bunch of stuff, and then I was thinking about changing this to another class, to a normal container or something else, but it wasn't working. Like it was hiding the tree, so I just decided that it's easier to leave it like this. So I think it's something about the split container, some property that it has that makes the tree be on the right place. And I just realized that like maybe I am showing the tree only when after the button was clicked, but I don't remember. But maybe not. I think it's here. And that's why it's not mattering that I have the split container, but I think it's probably not. It might be something else. But I think here the issue is probably something related to the I think it's two things. It's not loading the tree properly and it's not hiding the button. So I have to remember what I was doing here. It's probably because of this. I think I changed this on the presenter. These functions I had to change because I was removing some stuff, I think, on the other classes. But the thing is, I don't remember really well because I was focused on the other stuff. So it must be because of the configuration. The thing is weird is that it should delete the thing as well. So this is the reason why. I think it's both on the configuration and something on the view that is happening. Probably because of the configuration. Maybe because of this. But I think it doesn't make sense. Oh, so it's creating a circular thing. Like it's opening, it should be saving stuff. It's probably on the load file system. I should change to save config. I set current directory and save config. I think the issue is the configuration. I'm just starting to think about like because there is probably an issue with the tree as well. But it's probably the same thing, I think. Just load file system. 'Cause I think this one was connected to. You was supposed to call rescan, I think, which is a function that they were using to call scan changers, so rescan or something like that. I think this. And the problem with calling save config is that it's not gonna update the model after, I think. Hmm. The reason why this is happening is because I changed the way that I was doing this. Like I put this function here, and then I changed this function to do something else, and then I didn't change the other one. So I'm thinking whether or not I should create another function or what should I do here. It's happening because of the path. So when I click the button, it's running this, which is still loading the previous configuration, I think, and then it creates the button again. But after I select there, you should save a new path. You should set the new root path. Should be the new path that the function got. So you should set on this class the new path, which I think it is doing on the other function, which is the callback. Like this function is the callback from the other one now. So after I select the button, it's going to emit the signal with the new path to this one. So this is going to have the path that is selected on the dialog there. So I am setting the thing here, but the issue is on this one because this one already has the previous. No, because when this one doesn't work, it's gonna load the thing again on the view. That's the issue. I think I should probably. So the question is whether or not to decouple the functionality or to change or to add another function. Because I think that's they are for different purposes. Because like they're kind of like the same thing, but in different contexts is different. Like in both situations, I'm setting a new root directory from different places. But I think that's almost the situation where you hit the button, you don't want to load another one. But maybe on the other one, you also don't want to load the previous configuration. You want to set, so it's kind of different. So I think you should probably change. So I should probably decouple the. I should just leave these ones there on the other one. But the question is, why did I put the load config here? I think it's because I confused the load with the save. I think it was because of the uncollapsed paths. It's like, how do I store the state? Because I didn't have the distinction on the config file, so now I have to think about, like, yeah, I think I need to save the configuration before I set the root. So I'm gonna pass this on the other thing because I do think that I need to decouple. So I need to put this back here again. And then on the other one, I'm just gonna keep this functionality here. I just remove this. And then I just replace this part on the other one. But I do think that I need to. So I think I need to save the configuration first. So save the previous configuration, the previous path. But this is the problem, is because I'm using the same one. That's the issue. So it doesn't work to have the. I need to have two things. Oh, but maybe it does work. So what is the question here? So when you save this one, the previous path, you guess the current uncollapsed paths, puts there. Yeah, so the question is, when you saves again, is it going to rewrite the... I think you won't, because the section is different. So I guess testing is probably the best way. I think... Yeah, actually, I think you need your... I'm not really... Maybe I should look into the editor node. Like, I'm not really sure if I only have this code here, if it's gonna... I think that is gonna erase the previous section and then put the new one, the new path. But then I'm gonna lose the state of the other directory. So I need a way to keep track of all of them. But then it doesn't make sense that I have to put on the code, because that doesn't make sense. So I would have to change the root path to be a vector or something, but I think that is not very good. But I'm 100% sure that they have different sections on the editor, so maybe I'll look into the editor node to see how they do it. Because I think what I have to do is save the previous configuration before I change the state. So in this function, I save the previous configuration, change the path to the new one, then clean the tree, and then I initialize the new configuration. So clean the cache on the model, initialize, start the scan. And then I should save the configuration again, I think, on this function. So after it does all of this stuff, I save the configuration. Then I only load on the beginning of this class. Yeah. But I need to figure out a way to add a new path each time that the path changes, instead of erasing the previous ones. So that's the question. And I don't wanna avoid using a vector because I think it just gets very confusing. It would obviously be better if I could separate into sections. Like for each root, I have a different section, and then depending which root it is, it just writes those sections to the file. So I should test this first, this way, to see, but I'm pretty sure it is going to erase the previous ones, I think. Already did this. Mm. As I think one of the parts was that thing, and the other one was this. Might be because they split box. Sure. Hmm. Maybe because of this. Pretty sure. Hmm. I'll test this first. But probably I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, I think. Because I'm not really sure about the configuration. Let's see. Also, it doesn't erase the other one. No, maybe it does actually. Actually, probably not. I think it just writes to the file. So I think I can do it the way. If it just writes and then it doesn't erase the previous stuff on the file, then I can just do it the way that I'm doing there, which is the easiest one. And then if I have to, I think about this after I solve everything else. That's better, I think. Yeah, nice. So now let's see the other. Actually, let me. So I'm gonna close because when you close, it's supposed to save. So it is saving now. So now when I open again, I'm gonna see if it's gonna open with this path here. So that's gonna be on the load config. I think it probably will. So it's just gonna look for the. Actually, maybe not because of the root path. So I'm gonna have to change this. So I think it's gonna open with the open button folder. So how do I think I need a variable to keep track of the last. Hmm. So I think on the beginning, it's also kind of weird. Oh no, in the beginning the root path is an empty string. That's why in the beginning of the file there is a empty string. So I think in the beginning I should I should every time that I save a configuration, I should have a new key there. So yeah, that's what I think I already know what to do. We should be on the save. Yeah, I think it should. Oh, obviously it's gonna be both on the save and the thing. So here I put the empty path. Should probably have another. Because like this one is gonna depend on the what is the state on the beginning, which is I'm using this thing here. So I'm not really sure if I should have another thing because this like it would be better to have a variable on this one, but I'm not sure if it's worth it. Or maybe I just leave it like this and then I create another variable and then just set should the root path in the beginning. But if I have this, it does make things kind of confusing. Hmm. Oh, maybe this one is another thing. Hmm. Not sure what is the best name to put on this. Because it's probably better to make this equal to a variable in the beginning and then use that on the configuration here. Like making the section based on the path is the easiest way, obviously. Maybe you should go back to the way that I was doing the sections before and then just create other variables for. No, but the problem is that each additional. Like I'm using the same variable every time that it changes the root path, but I have to save in different places. Yeah, I do think in like also the other stuff is gonna be associated. So I do need more than one section. So what I'm thinking about doing here is just like creating another variable on the beginning configuration, because when it loads the configuration, it needs to is not gonna load from the previous one. Like if I load the way that I'm doing here, it's always gonna load from the empty string section first. So if I have another variable that keeps track of what was the last root directory, then I can use that variable here instead of the root path. Let me think on this. The reason why I'm thinking is that I might put load config on different places. So I think that the way that is doing right now is just on the beginning there. And so it just calls here on the initialization. But I'm thinking about what if I at some point put this function on somewhere else. Then if I make it dependent on like the root path or something, it might cause problems. So I'm trying to see if this makes sense or not. Because I think that the way that it is now is not going to load correctly. And it's kind of bad as well, actually. Maybe we will load correctly, actually. No, in the beginning, so it's not going to cache correctly. That's the thing. Because so it's setting correctly, and then after you click the button, it opens correctly. But then when you close and you open the application again, it's gonna start off with the empty path. So when it starts off with the empty path, then the load config is not gonna load anything. It's gonna show the button again, even though it shouldn't, because it's just gonna be loading from the file, and the current root path is gonna be the empty string. So maybe here I set the root path based on this thing here. So maybe I have to do something similar to this. I'm not gonna do this other variable. I'm just gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna put twice just to make sure. Maybe I'll erase from here. So obviously the other question is whether or not I need to set it here, but I think if I call the function, it's just gonna set and doesn't matter. But if it doesn't have last root path, I just initialize again as well. Maybe we should put this one inside of this one because it's doing the same thing. Uh, hmm. The main difference is this section. So I think the confusing thing here is that like this one is gonna work because I'm gonna set based on this one. That's the thing that is kind of confusing. I think I should put this one inside of this one, and then I just remove this stuff. But I think I probably don't even need this one. It's very confusing because I'm not really sure. If I don't need this one, then do I need the first one to begin with? I think I need the first one because of this section. Yeah, I need the first one because it's like a placeholder, and the second one is more like a placeholder. So when you change the path during the application execution, like you're working one path, then you open another one. That's what the purpose of this one. But the other one is like a placeholder for like the last thing that was open. So the main difference is, so I do think I need the both, but then the question is whether or not it matters to put this stuff here, because then I can just do it based on this one. Hmm. I think, yeah, so maybe this one is just on the save. This is very confusing. Because maybe I don't need maybe I don't need this one. Or I can do it without it. The difference is this section here. But then like why am I saving this one? Doesn't make sense. Let me think about the different scenarios. When you save the config. And because I think that it makes sense because when you save it, like I'm caching the previous one. When you change from one directory to the other, it caches the information for that directory on a different section. So that this one is able to retrieve the information based on that. And this one is always fixed on the empty section, which is the beginning. So I think on this one I don't need this part. It's very confusing. Like I'm not sure if it's necessary to have this. I think it is because of the nature of the thing. I think it is when you save multiple times, because when you're switching the directories. But it feels kind of weird because you're only using this one to load. So that's the part that I'm not sure. So like, what was the difference there? So this one is gonna be called after. So let me think about the flow from the beginning. So this happens after I'm having this call. This function as a callback after the path was selected through the button in the beginning once it doesn't have any configuration. Then it's gonna save the configuration first. So this is because of the other situation. But in this case, you would only save the empty string so that you wouldn't have a path. The path would be the empty string, which would mean that you would use that as a section and then save this stuff there. I think I don't need this one. I just get from the. I just do it the way that I was doing before, and then I just get from the empty string instead of getting from the root path. But then it doesn't make sense. So it sets the current directory with the new path that you wouldn't have. And then at some other point, it's going to save that to the thing. But then what happens when you change again? Let me go back because this is confusing me. So I'm gonna go back to see if there is an error in the way that I was doing before. Because maybe it doesn't matter to have this. But I do think it does. I just confused why. I'm gonna delete the file and start from the scratch again. I think it was because of the first time that it initializes. At the first time that it initializes from the root. So it initializes from the empty string and not from the. I think that's the difference. So the question is if you put the load configuration, but I think it is not gonna matter, that's the problem. So the question is how to make it. Oh, yeah, that's the thing. So I wanted the other path. I wanted to have this last path. Because it's a different section. It's not writing the section here because it's an empty string. So I think when it's an empty string, it doesn't write the section. So I think that this was the thing there. Yeah, I wanted to save the last one so that it doesn't get from the empty path. So the problem is that I'm making based on the root path to load the configuration. And the root path is going to be an empty string in the beginning. So I need to get the load path from. But you should be getting, since it is an empty string, you should be getting the last one. No, because it's not necessarily the case it's gonna save. So I guess I should just put an additional value here and then put the root path here. And this way is gonna get whatever is, yeah, so that's probably the solution. So I don't need the other variable. Because now it's gonna save whatever the last time was saved, it's gonna save whatever root path we had at that time. So when it loads for the first time, is gonna get from that from the empty section, and it's gonna have the root path because I'm using here the same key. So it's gonna get the last root path that was open on here. Actually, you should probably let's do this because it's a different thing. But it doesn't matter that much because they should be the same. But it's better to have the same value there for both of them, I think. It's very confusing if you think about it. So now it doesn't have anything. So let me. What's this one? So I'll put that one, then I'm gonna close, and I'm gonna see if it's saved or not. Yeah, so now when I open again, it should open from this path, I think. So I have to see this one first. So the bottom I know that is working now. Now I have to see from the start if it's gonna work. And if it works, then the last thing to see if it works is the changing from the navbar. If all of them are working, then I move on to the next thing. I'm gonna delete this file and then I'm gonna open again. So I remove the section here. So delete the file, open again, select the path from the bottom, then that's. Yeah, so it is opening the correct one. That's doing this one, I think. Nice. So it is working now. So now it's changing to the new one. Nice. So not. I think that's probably it. Let's go back to this. Yeah, nice. So it seems that it is working. So I'm gonna close. I'm gonna delete the file. Then open again, test the 3 situations, and then move on to the next. Hopefully the copy. Oh, there is an annoying thing actually on the copy paste that I just remember, which is the shortcuts. So and I do think that is very useful. So this is probably the one that is most useful on the Ctrl C, Ctrl V. I don't remember if I use a lot, but I think that I should probably try to implement. The problem with the shortcuts is that it's gonna open up a new, like another branch of stuff to do, which I was trying to delay for later once I have everything else. So maybe I'll just keep the options on the menu now, and then later I do the shortcuts. Because it would be nice to have the Ctrl C, Ctrl V attached to the copy paste. Yeah, it's working. So I'm gonna close, then open again to see if it's gonna open with the new one. But I'm pretty sure it will. So I'm gonna try to implement copy paste now. Oh no. So the thing is that there's 2 different ways to do it from Godot. Two different ways to put the icon there on the menu, and one is for shortcuts. The other one, as far as I've seen, I didn't spend too much time with the shortcut ones, but I know there's different ways to add the things to the menu. So I'm not really sure. Like maybe I should go back to the editor nodes or the file system doc, the original class, to see how they do it. Yeah, nice. So move on to the next stuff. So it's basically this is the stuff. So every time you click a button, is gonna run this function. This function is the one that creates the menu. And the way you add the icons is based on this, and then whatever index you put here is gonna be the one that gets passed to the function. So it's like an argument to the callback function that is gonna be depending on the index of the icon. So like this is gonna have a signal connected to it, the menu. Then depending which button you click, it's gonna send this to the signal. And then on the function that is the callback, you have a switch statement that allows you to put different logic for different stuff. So that's basically how you associate. Like this would have this is inside of the switch that has the functionality for the new folder option. But for icons that have shortcuts, it's different, and I commented out. Yeah, so these ones are for, but I don't remember how they were before I did this. So like I basically just changed so that they don't have shortcuts because they on the editor they use this macro here. And this is the part that I'm not sure if I should do now or not, because it might be very annoying to. I basically have to implement something similar to the way that they are doing, but then it's gonna get into a much more complicated thing, which is the overall picture of the way that I'm designing everything, which is similar to what happened with the theme. So on the theme right now, I think I have functions on the module that I have there that I'm gonna use to create different themes. And then in the beginning of the scene function, which is the function that is gonna connect the nodes that are gonna make up the scene. So like basically a function that builds the scene tree. The beginning of that one, I'm gonna use the function that the functions that I'm gonna build on the module that are gonna build different themes. So compose different themes, and then I'm gonna set the theme to the roots of the nodes, and that's how I'm planning to implement different themes for different stuff. Because then I can reuse the theme for other applications, for example. Or for different themes for different things. It's easier to compose. And I think that the shortcuts are probably going to be very similar, so that's the thing. Because if I do this now, then I might have to do something similar to the theme, where like create other functions and then think more about the module perspective, and then think about how I'm going to initialize that in the beginning of the scene, and then how to connect that to the scene, and whether or not that's going to be coupled with the classes or not, and like how to. Which probably it will, and then I have to think about how to connect them. So this is the reason why I was avoiding doing this now. But maybe I should see how they do it here. I'm gonna try to implement something similar. It looks like this is just a function that is used in the editor inside, but it's not from the editor. And the thing is that I'm gonna change the way that I put the icons there. So either I'm gonna use this stuff or use this other one for the copy paste. And I'm not really sure if there is a big difference between. I assume that probably not. But I do remember like there was something the thing that I saw in one situation on one of these options here is that when you don't have anything to paste, it shows up like faded like this. And this happened to me because of something else that I was changing on one of the options. And I think it has to do with the icon stuff. So like I want to basically do the same thing here, where like if I don't have the variables inside of the class that are related to the copy, then I don't show the option when they open the menu. But I guess it's probably gonna be an if else. But the problem is that if else, I think is not gonna show the option. I want the option to show, but should not do anything. Or to show in this different way. And one of the options that I had, this happened, but not because I wanted, like I was changing something else and then this happened with the option. But I don't remember how I did this. I think it's probably something to do with the icon. When you have the icon, you need to put something else. The stuff that it was related to this is the stuff of the folder color. It's basically this one that they create another menu to use on the other one. So this function here. I think it was because of this. So like the way you're setting here, if you don't put this, it's gonna be -1 by default, I think. Actually, it's different functions. So if you use this one, it's gonna be -1 by default. But if you use this one, you can specify which index you want to be associated with whatever icon you're putting. So I think it was something related to this, I think. It's probably something to do with the... So one question is whether or not sure. And the other one is how to make option not clickable. So these are the two things I have to figure out. So I'm gonna put in the same way that they are doing there. I'm gonna put it on top of this thing here. Just a copy path. So here you just do this basically. And I change the name here. The enum. It's probably maybe you put file or folder. And I think that is only. So maybe just put a copy paste. Let's remove this. I'm gonna go here, put this. I think I'm just gonna use the same icon because I don't care that much. So this. And if you want the option to only show if it is a folder, is based on the logic in the way that they did there. This paths here. So the way that they call this function is based on the selected paths, which they put here. And then I created these two functions on the view to determine whether or not the thing that was selected is a directory. And then I'm just going to use this to determine whether or not to show the option. So here would be I do think that it makes sense to put this inside of the paths equals 1 because, but maybe not actually. Maybe I want to allow copying multiple things. But I'm just gonna leave it like this because I think it doesn't matter that much. Then you have to put these options there on the function that is going to be the callback, which is the file option function. And then on the options you put, you're just going to put the logic to copy and paste. And I don't think I even need to put on the display server on the clipboard. Like, it's only necessary to do that if I want to implement the copy and paste outside of the application, which I think it doesn't matter that much. Because usually, either you're gonna do it from the command line using move or something like this to transfer files or folders, or you just review on the file explorer and then you open the other path and then you just drag. And that's usually what I do. And it's not something that matters that much. Okay, if one of those people that wanna do everything fast, then just do it from the command line either way. And if you don't care about it that much, you're gonna use the GUI, then you can do it through the file system anyway. So I don't think it's something that's that big of a deal. They also don't have on VS Code, so I think it doesn't matter that much. Like, it doesn't have high enough ROI to invest the time. So it might be very difficult to copy and paste cross-platform, and there isn't a lot of reward for that. So I think I'm just gonna do it inside of the application and then move on. So the biggest question is whether or not to make it so that I have the shortcuts. So I'll be right back, and I'm gonna probably roll this on the RNG or something like this. Because it doesn't matter that much. I'm gonna have to obviously figure out the shortcuts at some point. It's just more about like the order of things. Because like obviously this kind of stuff I don't care that much about. I'm just doing so because it has to be done. So like it's just roadblocks to get to the stuff that actually I think is interesting. So this is another one of those things where like I have to do it, but it's not that interesting. And the other stuff is more interesting, but then like you kind of have this stuff on the back of your mind, like you need to get it done. So it might be just better to focus on this now and just figure out, and then I just reuse. Because on the other classes, yeah, I might need to. But the thing is, like for shortcuts, I was thinking more about like when I have to spend some time studying the VS Code and Vim shortcuts, and I'm probably gonna get them and put options to, like for different parts of the docs, to use different shortcuts. And for the other stuff that I'm gonna do, I'm probably gonna have to add other shortcuts as well. So like it's something that I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking about, and it's gonna depend on the other stuff that I already have. So maybe I'll set up the beginning stage now, and then leave the rest for later once I have the other stuff. Or I just implement the easy way to just put the options here, then change the function. And I'm probably just gonna do the same functionality that the copy path has. I just get the path that was selected, put a member variable in the class, and then when it's time to paste, so this is basically gonna be the copy, and then when it's time to paste, you just get the path, and then you update the state of the model, and the model is just basically sending signals. So you update the state based on the class, the view, then send a signal to the presenter to update the cache. Which I think I can use a function that they already have, which is try duplicate item, which is the one that is used when you drag stuff. But I think that's maybe I can't use that one because I think that one is gonna remove from the previous spots. And the paste obviously wanna copy. I think it's just easier to get, like, because I'm doing everything based on a cache that I have on the front end as well. That is a hash map. I think it's probably better to just get the path, get the node, the 3 item node from the cache, then create a copy of that on the question is obviously how to create a copy. So on the paste, you need to get the target location, which is you're gonna have, and then from the target location, you create. The question is like how to move. I have the other functions for this, but I think that the other functions, I'm not really sure if I can use them for this stuff. Because yeah, the functions that I already have, I think they remove the previous spots. So I think that the try duplicate item is a function that I'm using there on the drag. So maybe I'll talk about the drag after I come back. I'm gonna explain briefly explain the superficial view of how this works. And then I'm gonna probably roll the dice or roll on the RNG to see whether or not to figure out this stuff now or later. And then maybe I should implement the first part first, obviously. So I think I should implement the functions first. Then I'm probably gonna stop streaming actually. So I'm gonna implement the easy way first, which is just these ones, and go based on what I'm thinking about, and then test to see if it works. Then I stop streaming, and then off stream I think about like whether or not to do shortcuts now, and then change the icon so that the shortcut works, or to move on to the other steps here, and then come back later to. But now after saying this, I think it's probably better to come back later because like shortcuts is like I said something I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking about because it's gonna change everything. I think like the selection of shortcuts depend on the whole scene, so it's a much more complicated thing to figure out, and it's gonna be related to selection of the nodes as well, the focus of the nodes. So I have to see if I can have the same shortcut available, but for different things depending which component, which class is focused. So like for example, if the editor is focused, the file editor, then the Ctrl V is gonna do something. But if another doc on the scene is focused, then the Ctrl V does something else. I have to see if that's possible. There's a lot more stuff to think about. I think it's probably better to now that I think about it, I'm gonna leave the shortcuts for later because I'm gonna have to think about a bunch of other stuff. And I think it's just better to figure out everything at once, like because I'm gonna have to, like the thing is I might have to change the class later anyway because of the shortcuts. So if I solve this now, it might be a waste of time later because I'm gonna have to redo it again anyway. So I think it's just better to do the easy thing now and then move on to the other parts. I'll be right back. Then I'm gonna explain the drag functionality, how it works there on C++. The drag and drop of user or of GUI items. So I'm gonna take a break. I think of 20 minutes or something like this. So I'll be right back. So I'm actually kind of tired already, so I think I'm just gonna explain the drag functionality and then implement this copy and paste upstream. I'm just gonna say that probably the way that I'm gonna implement. So there's try move item and try duplicate item. The try move item is used on this function here, the move operation confirm, and on the rename operation. But I think it just removes the path, and it's something that I just realized now that I'm using the same signal on both of them for updating the cache on the model. And I should probably use different ones because this one I think it adds new paths. So this is basically the copy that functionality they already had, but I have to change some stuff on here, so I'm not really sure if it's gonna work. But I think that's on the file system doc. They already had this probably. They had this function for sure because they created these functions, but I don't remember if they have copy functionality. Actually, I'm gonna open the editor and I'm gonna see. I think they probably have copy functionality. So all I have to do is just keep track of the path on the copy. So on the copy thing, I just put a member variable on the class that is gonna keep track of the path that was selected when the copy ran. Then on the paste, you get that path and the new one, and you just call one of these functions. I think that's how I'm gonna try to implement this. The only thing is gonna be the signal that I'm not 100% sure I might have to change, or the signal and the classes and the functions I might have to change both. So this function apparently is also probably used. This is another thing. You should probably look into the. Oh, this is already the file system block. I think the other one deleted a bunch of stuff because I do think that is a very good philosophy to remove. Like, don't be conservative when you're removing stuff, and then just add when you think is necessary. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I try to implement that on the thing there and just remove as many things as possible. So I can just look into this older one to see how they were doing this. So that's probably what I'm going to do upstream. So put breakpoints on this class, interact with the thing here, and then see what happens. So they have copy path. I always still have there. Yeah, this part I deleted because I think that it didn't make sense. So they have a dialog that opens when you want to move. Hmm. So the duplicates, I assume it's probably gonna be just like it is on VS Code, where it just copies on the same place probably. So it's not really copying, but it's kind of similar. So I can reuse the functionality. Yeah, so I think that's it just creates another one on the same spot. But I think that they're using probably the try duplicate item. I don't have the debugger open, so. So yeah, the way that I'm doing now, I'm removing from the cache, which is probably not the best. So like I did the signal here because I thought I only needed one for both functions, but now I'm realizing that I probably need a different one for this one and just get. I think for this one, if it is just copying, I just need the new path. Actually, I need both because I need to. But this part is just for the. I might have to change actually here as well. I think that this function I didn't change, just changed the other one. The only thing that I did was remove the dialog here and then just leave the functionality to drag. So I still have that function there because it is used on when you are dragging and dropping, like here. So I don't think I spent too much time trying to. No, actually, I did spend a bunch of time. So like I kind of understand how it works, but I didn't spend time thinking whether or not it's necessary to change. Because the other one I changed a lot, because I thought like it didn't make a lot of sense the way that for my stuff, for what I wanted to do, it wasn't making a lot of sense. So I thought that I could simplify a lot. But this one I didn't spend too much time thinking about. So I know, like it is doing recursion to traverse everything, which is something that I thought that maybe like I could simplify as well. Because I think that like if you're operating with the tree, I think that's the main difference is that like the way that they had before, they were reconstructing the whole tree each time. So yeah, every time there was an update, they were cleaning the tree and then reconstructing everything again. But I think if you assume that you have the whole tree state and you're just switching, you're moving nodes on the tree, then you don't need to recurse everything. You just take the object and then you just move places. That's a lot easier. But the main issue is the paths that like you need to change the metadata of everything to update for the paths so that the other functionality works well. So because of that reason, you need to recurse. You need to traverse the nodes that were changed. But I still think that's probably that not probably that there might be ways to simplify this, but I'm not really sure. And the question is whether or not this is gonna remove nodes in the way that I'm doing there, or if it's just gonna add new nodes. I think it just adds new nodes because of this functionality here. So if it is a file, it makes a directory recursively from that file. And if it is a folder, it makes the folder. And then I think that there is some stuff about the conflicts that are used on outside of this on the other function that is an enum, I think. Yeah, this enum here, which is whether to overwrite or to copy or something like this. This part is the one that I didn't spend too much time trying to understand until now. So this path is kind of confusing as well, but it is related to the drag. It's gonna get this path here from the drag there. It's gonna get this shoe move, I think, from the drag, and then this is gonna be the new path that is moving. Did I put inside of the function? I just realized, I think maybe this one I put inside of the function. Yeah, I put it here. So this one is inside of the function. I think it is inside of the function because of the paths. So it was the thing that was kind of annoying. This was the reason why on the model I had to make functions based on only one path, and then derive the parent, the parent path and the name of the file from the path that I'm sending here, which is not very good. And I had to do this because there wasn't a way to get the information on this function here. There wasn't an easy way to do this. So I thought that the easiest way was to just change the function of the model. But on this one, I think that I decided to leave the signal outside because of the information that is passed on the signal. So if you put inside, this function is used on the other place. The function is recursive, that's the problem. So yeah, because it is recursive, I thought that it was a waste of time to... Yeah, I think that this should move is the old path, and then the new path is the new path, obviously. So you only need the old path and the new path to update the paths on the model, because if it is a folder, it's going to traverse anyway, based on the way that I did things. But I think that the problem is that this one is going to remove and not just add. And the question is whether or not do I need to... If it doesn't, if it just adds, do I need the old path on the model? Hmm. Yeah, maybe that's actually harder than I thought. I think that, like, I'm thinking about if this doesn't remove the files on the old path and just adds new ones, do I need to have the old path to add the new ones correctly to the cache? And I think the reason, I think probably not. And the reason why is because the model uses the dir access class and the file access. And the dir access and file access directly the operational system model of the files. So it's gonna be already up to date because it's gonna be reflected directly on the operational system. And this one also uses dir access to actually change the files on the operational system. And the logic here is just for the view. So like just to update the tree for the view. Then obviously inside of the function uses dir access to actually update the model on the operational system. And I think that this is probably the reason why I only need the root path, because as it traverses the thing from the, like, this is gonna update the model on the operational system of the new path. And then by the time that the model runs on the backend, it's gonna use dir access and it's gonna access the updated model from the operational system of the new path. So I don't need to have the old paths to get, like, extract the information of what was the name of the files and folders in the relative path from the old path, and then take that into consideration to add that to the new path. I think you can just get the new path, which is the parent. If it's a file, it's just going to be a file. But if it's a folder, it's just going to traverse the folder from the new path, and it's already going to have the updated model because it's accessing the model from the operational system. So I think that's, in this situation, I probably don't need to pass the old path here, that you move, if it just adds paths and doesn't remove. The other one I'm passing because I think the other one is removing. Yeah, but I think that probably the name. No, I think this one it does. This one removes. Yeah, this one removes, and this one probably doesn't. I think that's the difference. So this one. So for copying, for pasting, I can use this one, I think, and just pass a true here. So I call this function pass true, and then pass the new path, which is the paste, and then I have to update the true move. And then I create another signal, and then I just remove this argument here and just pass the new path. So the model receives the new path. Like, the presenter is the one that listens for this event and has a callback function. Yeah, this one. So this one is the one for the rename, which uses try move item, I think. So it does change, it removes the old one. So I think that's probably good enough. So this function is from the model, remove from the cache the old path, and then add the new one. And I'm using the same callback function for the duplicate. So you should probably create another signal and then just either create another signal or add a boolean to the signal and then I just pass false and true, depending on which situation, then change the function here. Probably the boolean is easier, I think. You can create a whole new function. I think I'm just gonna pass the boolean. So I'm gonna explain just superficially what I understood, because I didn't spend too much time on the actual event cycle to understand how it works, but I didn't spend time on the macro there and understand the classes. Like Godot has built-in functionality for drag and drop of user interface items, which is basically the animation or the stuff that shows there when you're clicking and dragging like this. So this kind of stuff is the drag and drop functionality on Godot as well. It works like this. So like the icon that shows there next to the cursor, the texture that shows there, and also the animation of where to put. You can customize that based on this macro here. So they implemented functions on the control class, which all the user interface nodes inherit from. And you can use this macro to set up the functions. So you call this macro here, passing the object and the type. I think that is the parent. This is the type of the parent class. So, like I said, I didn't spend too much time. But there's basically three functions that matter the most, which are these functions here, which are callables that these are going to set up on the control class. So I imagine that at different parts of the event loop on the viewports is going to check to see whether or not the class has set these callables on the control. And if it has, it's going to call the callable. The callable macro is just a macro that is going to initialize a callable class, and the callable class is a class that they use to hold the state of callback function. So they hold inside of the callable, they hold the pointer to the object that is going to call the function, and they hold the address of the function. So, and their types of the arguments. So it basically allows them to rebuild the function call from a class at a different parts on the system. And the way that they do this is by using the parent class to translate the types. So it's basically just an easier way to think about it is just a function callback from a class. So this is going to be from this control class. And the control class is going to call these functions here, which is based on the chew. So the chew in this case, on my situation there, would be the fs view class. It's like the fs view class is going to call the function that you set up there. So it calls the function from the tree. And it sets the callback from the function that you are using the macro from. So on the class that you use the macro to put this, you're going to have to define these three different functions, which is get drag data, can drop data, and drop data. So it's basically the whole parts of the cycle. The get drag data is the functionality that you want to happen when the dragging starts. The can drop data is whether or not it's a functionality that is going to return a boolean to determine whether or not you can drop the data on that place. And the drop data is what happens when you let go of the drag. And then on the notification, you can there's a part of the cycle in the notification function that you can also add functionality, which they have there as well on the file system doc. And that's basically how you implement. So like for each situation, what the main difference is going to be is the data you're moving around. So how the logic for determining what's going to be the data, and how to build what's going to show next to the cursor as you're moving. So in this case, it would be like the control.age box that shows up there. And then this other thing that's showing like hold shift to drop, it would be like I think that this functionality is usually implemented on the can drop data. But this part I'm not 100% sure because I haven't implemented on other classes. So it's basically setting this callbacks, and yeah, so the from this situation would be the tree. So it's gonna call this function from the tree. So it's gonna set these callables on the tree. The callable, these three callables here are gonna be the callables from the FS view. So it's like the three functions we define on the FS view that are gonna run on from the tree, on the tree event loop. Is gonna run this. It's gonna check to see if the tree class has these callables set up, and if it has, then at each part of the cycle, it's gonna call the callback function. So what this is saying basically is that I think that the tree is gonna be the class you want the drag and drop to work with, and the other type would be the class you want to. You're gonna define the callbacks that are gonna run on the first class. It's basically saying, I want to implement the drag and drop on the tree class, but the callables, the callback functions, are going to be defined on the FS view. And that's basically what this is saying. And then here they have these functions I just got from them. I just changed slightly to make it work. But they're going to have these predefined types here based on. I think I looked for other examples and they all have these variables here. So I think just because they are probably defined on the control. I think so. Like they need to receive the same arguments, but then you can. What's going to be different is what you do with the arguments, which is just logic on the function. So this situation, like this, would be the first one that runs. So the first one that runs is get drag data, and then they have these other functions. So I think this one has to return a dictionary, which is going to be the dictionary passed to the other one, which is the can drop. Not sure. I think it passes to both of them. So the first one you create it has to be a variant class, I think. So this has to return a variant. Yeah, probably a variant, but usually it's going to be a dictionary that is going to be passed as arguments to the other ones, which is the data here. So whatever you build on the first one is going to be passed here, and then it allows you to determine how the data flows. So I'm going to explain on this example here what's happening. So the tree gets selected, gets the paths that were selected on the tree. So this is a functionality from the tree class. Actually, I think it's a function here, but then they use the functionality from the tree class to get the selected. So it's basically because you can hold shift. I think this is built in on the tree as well. You can click an item, hold shift, and click on another one, and then select multiple items. And I'm pretty sure that it is implemented on the tree, the functionality. And it's based on an enum, which is the mode of the tree that determines whether you can select multiple items or not. But this is basically gonna get the items that are selected. So it's gonna pass this one to the other function that they created, and the from I think is the control node that is calling this function, which is probably gonna be the tree, I think. So this part I spent some time thinking about this. I think probably could be optimized, but I'm not sure if it matters that much. Yeah, but I think that so it looks like the stuff is built. The stuff that is gonna show as you're dragging is gonna be you have to implement that on the first function, which is the get drag data. So they're building the user interface components that are gonna show as you are moving the files. I didn't see like where did they put this. Maybe these parts, maybe it's probably better to look into the original one because I might have deleted something. So I don't remember if it's showing there or not. But obviously, I assume that they need to add this as either they have to add this as a child, or there is going to be some functionality on the control class that is going to put this VBox here. But here, I'm pretty sure that they are building the elements to represent each file or folder being dragged. The paths are the ones selected, so it's basically looping over the paths here and here, and it's going to build this element here based on the paths and on a limit size there that they have. And then it's going to put the data on this dictionary here for the other functions. So this is the class here. This is the function. So this function here is going to determine what's going to show there. So the p from is going to be the tree in this case because of the standard here. So I think pretty sure that the p from is going to be based on the macro. There's the first object you put on the macro that I showed there in the beginning. So it's calling this, which is probably going to be on the control, and it's passing this GUI element, which is whatever you want to show, which they built here, which is going to be in this situation the VBox container showing the files and folders. So this is defined on the control. So it gets the data on this one, and then when it calls this one, it's going to pass this drag data. It's going to be this p data here. And this is going to have the functionality to determine whether or not you can drop the items, which basically means whether or not you can call the other function, which is this drop data. So I'm pretty sure the point is where the mouse is at, probably. The truth there is where they're going to put the files that are going to be moved. The point is probably where it's at, and so here they determine the target, so which is the p there on the outside, based on the position of the mouse. So the tree class has these functions that allow you to get the item based on where the mouse is at. So I think they're doing the logic based on whether or not the cursor is currently on one of the items. And then depending which one it is, they update the target here, which is on the outside is going to be the p there. So the point here, I'm pretty sure, is where the cursor is at. Then they're going to get the element based on where the cursor is at. The path is saved on the element in the beginning there. When you're creating the node, you can use set metadata, and then you pass the column, which is the cell, and then the path as the second argument. So each tree is divided on columns where you can put different data. And each column is going to be a cell, which is a struct defined inside of the tree item. So each cell has metadata. It has a bunch of different data that you can put on the struct. And then they define what you want to put on each column. So the state of each column, let's say. So depending what the target item is gonna update the path, the target path, which is this one. And then on this one is going to determine whether or not this is going to return false if you can drop on that path, or true. False if you can't, and true if you can. So this is another thing that's, because of the way that they did it, is kind of weird. I didn't change this one because it was working, but maybe I should change this because I don't like to rely on this thing here. That's why I asked ChatGPT about these functions, and I'm pretty sure that they work because I tested this other function that I added here. Just tries to open as a directory, and then returns whether or not it is valid. I think that's more reliable to use. So it's basically checking based on this. The data that was passed there in the beginning. So this data that was returned in the first function has the paths here and loops over the paths, and then checks to see if they are a directory. Yeah, if it is on the paths that were originally, then returns false. And it returns true. It has these properties which also come from the drag data in the beginning. But obviously you can put whatever logic you want. You just return false if you don't want the thing to be able to drop on the array, or you return true to signal that you can drop. Then the last one is obviously going to be this, which is the one that actually is the logic you want to run when the user let goes of the mouse. It's very similar from the other one, but then on this one it calls this move operation, which is the function that actually changes the paths there. I think pretty sure that this one I changed. And this is the only place that it changes this shoe move here, which is going to be used on this one. This one is the one that is either going to duplicate or copy. So it updates the shoe move, which is a member variable of the class on here, based on the data of the paths that are being dragged, which is this f names, which comes from the drag data paths, which builds there on the beginning. So this drag data, it comes from the first function, which is this one, which gets based on the selected paths. So it's basically the selected paths here that is going to have here, and it's going to put the selected paths on this shoe move, which is a member variable of the class, and then it calls this one based on the parent or the target, which you got from the middle function there, this function here. And then this one is going to use the shoe moves to determine how to move them using this function and the try move item. So it's not that hard to understand. I didn't spend much time studying how it works on the input cycle, but I think that's from the control is pretty much it. Every time you want to implement drag and drop, you just call the macro and define the three different functions, and depending which one, the first one is going to be the object that you want the drag to be called from, and the second argument is going to be the type that is going to have the callback functions to determine what happens when this object emits the event, the drag event. So I define the three functions that are on the cycle, and then it allows you to put what logic you want to happen. Then you can call the other function there. This function here to show another GUI element. So you can build the GUI element based on whatever logic you want to display as you're moving the cursor. And then you also have on the notification this part of the cycle here. This is called every time for each node on the cycle. On different parts of the cycle, it gets called for all the nodes on the tree. And this determines which part of the cycle it is. So this is going to be on the drag begin, obviously, and then drag end. So I think that this is additional logic you can do beyond the three different functions there. I think that this is probably going to be the data you build on the first function. So the first function that runs is that get drag data, and then it allows you to get the data that you build from that function from here. Yeah. So here they're just setting the flags. I think this part I can remove because it's for other stuff that they were doing there I'm not gonna do. So I'm gonna stop streaming here. I'm gonna think about I'm gonna try to implement the copy paste, the simple version of stream, and then think about what thing should do. I'm probably gonna try to I'm probably going to implement the fs change first. This two first, and then when it gets time for implementing these other three classes here, I'm gonna spend time thinking about which one is better to implement first. So it's either the doc manager that's gonna allow to switching between switching the layout of the scene, which I'm probably gonna reuse on all scenes. So I have default layouts, and then you can just drag and drop the other docs. Probably gonna try to implement the functionality there for the control. So I think it's gonna be a class that is gonna be similar to the one that editor node has. That it's gonna subscribe docs, and then based on the docs, it's gonna have the functionality to drag and drop, and then either make it as a parent of all the scenes or as a part of the scene always. And then the other two is gonna be the file, the class related to the files, logic, and the tabs of the files that is gonna it's gonna be connected with the file system through signals probably, and it's gonna be more complicated because of the all this stuff related to codes, to type checking and stuff like that. It's gonna be very hard, I think. And the other one is the terminal. So I might do the terminal first because it might be easier. So I'm just gonna start from the one that the editor has, which is just the output that it shows there. It's gonna be basically the terminal that shows up here. So I'm gonna start from the one that the editor has, and then I'm gonna improve or change depending on what I want to do. So I'm gonna think about which one of these to do first. So see you next.